There's a quiet voice inside you, not the one shaped by fear, not the one trying to be accepted, but the one you were born with. It whispers when you're alone. It pulls at your heart when something feels wrong. It stirs when you're about to settle for less. But over time, that voice gets buried beneath noise, expectations, pressure, survival. You start trusting outer opinions more than inner truth. You keep pushing through, while that voice waits patiently, painfully, for you to listen. It's not weak, it's not dramatic, it's the most honest part of you. The longer you ignore it, the more lost you feel. Not because you lack answers, but because you're not listening to the only place that has them. The inner voice doesn't scream, it invites. And if you have the courage to stop, listen, and follow, it will lead you exactly where you're meant to be. That inner voice, the one that gently nudges you, questions your choices late at night, or makes your stomach sink when something isn't right. It's not some vague feeling or random emotional reaction. It's rooted in your truth, in the parts of you that existed before the world taught you how to be. This voice forms in your earliest experiences, where you learned what safety feels like and what danger whispers like. It stores what you couldn't say out loud and what you wish someone had heard. It's the part of you that notices when you're betraying yourself, when you're saying yes but feeling no, when you're performing instead of living. And yet, most of us are taught to override it. We're taught to be polite, agreeable, successful, even if it means silencing the most honest part of ourselves. Over time, ignoring that voice becomes normal. You stop trusting it, because the world praises your mask more than your truth. But deep down you know it's there. You feel it in the tension in your body when you're in the wrong place, with the wrong people, doing things that don't match your values. You sense it in the deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep fixes. That's not just burnout, it's the pain of self-abandonment. Your inner voice is often quiet because it's not fighting for attention, it's waiting for your permission. It doesn't argue with the noise, it waits for the silence. And in that stillness, it tells you things that may be hard to hear. This relationship is draining you, this job is killing your spirit. This version of you isn't who you really are, not because it wants you to suffer, but because it wants to save you from living a life that doesn't belong to you. When you listen to it, you begin to reclaim the pieces of yourself you left behind. You start to make choices that feel right, even if they don't look right to others. You walk away from people who expect you to shrink and move toward those who make space for your whole self. But listening to your inner voice isn't a one-time event, it's a lifelong relationship. It gets clearer the more you honor it. It gets louder the more you act on it. And it gets softer when you betray it repeatedly. Not because it disappears, but because it's trying not to hurt you. You may have silenced it in the past because you had to survive. Maybe your truth wasn't safe in childhood. Maybe your boundaries were never respected. Maybe being too sensitive or too much made you hide what you really felt. But that doesn't make the voice wrong. It just means you've had to relearn how to hear it. And that takes courage, because truth often requires change. The reason your inner voice matters isn't just personal, it's essential. It's the compass that keeps you aligned with your deepest values. It's the warning bell that rings when your soul is being sold for approval. It's the whisper that says, "This isn't it," even when the world applauds you. And sometimes, it doesn't offer answers, it only offers awareness. But that awareness is powerful. It opens the door for healing. It starts the process of coming back to yourself. If you want to feel whole, you have to stop treating that voice like background noise. You have to get quiet enough to hear it, brave enough to trust it, and strong enough to follow it, even when it tells you to walk away from things you once thought you needed. This voice is not here to hurt you. It's here to liberate you. It's not the voice of fear. Fear shouts, panics, catastrophizes. This voice is calm, grounded, and often inconvenient, because it doesn't care about comfort. It cares about alignment. And here's the truth most people won't tell you. That voice may lead you into uncertainty, discomfort, even isolation, but it will never lead you into regret. It may ask you to be honest about what isn't working. It may ask you to break patterns that once kept you safe, but it will never ask you to be less than who you are. It will never demand that you perform. It will never shame you for being human. Instead, it will remind you, gently and consistently, that who you are beneath the noise is enough, that your feelings matter, that your boundaries are sacred, that your life isn't meant to be a performance, but a living expression of truth. So the next time that quiet voice speaks, listen, pause, breathe. Don't brush it off. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't bury it in busyness or distractions. Because that voice is not random. It's rooted in the most real part of you, the part that has always known who you are and what you came here to do. You weren't born doubting yourself, but came later through 1,000 small lessons. Every time you were told you're being dramatic when your feelings rose too strong. Every time someone laughed when you shared what you sensed. Every time you were asked to prove it, instead of being believed. Your body learned a dangerous habit to override your own knowing, and over time, your mind followed. You began filtering your instincts through logic, through what others would approve, through what made sense on paper but didn't feel right in your gut. This is how intuition gets buried, not because it disappears but because you were conditioned to mistrust it. As a child, maybe you noticed things others didn't. The tension in the room, the truth behind someone's words, the way something felt off before it showed. But in a world that values performance over perception, you were taught to disconnect from that deep inner sense. Schools rewarded compliance, not curiosity. Families praised obedience, not inner truth. Culture reinforced the idea that if it can't be explained, it shouldn't be trusted. And so you started second-guessing yourself. You began looking outward for answers you already held within. You started trusting people who didn't have your best interests, simply because they sounded sure. And when your body screamed no, you silenced it to keep the peace, to fit in, to avoid being labeled difficult, irrational, or too emotional. This is the heart of conditioning, the slow, invisible rewiring of your instincts to match the expectations of others. You learned to analyze instead of feel, to rationalize instead of listen. You trained yourself to seek permission before moving forward, but that conditioning came at a cost. You lost your connection to the most trustworthy guide you have, your intuition. It's not that it left you, it's that you stopped turning toward it. You stopped recognizing it when it spoke because its language didn't sound like what you were taught to trust. And yet, no matter how much you ignored it, it didn't go away. It lingered in your body, in your nervous system, in the ache that comes when you know something's off even if you can't explain why. It whispers in moments of silence, in the pause before you say yes to something you don't want, in the anxiety that hits when you betray yourself again. But if you've been conditioned long enough, you start to believe that these whispers are just overthinking, fear, or weakness. You don't see them for what they really are. Signs that your soul is still trying to guide you back to yourself. Reclaiming your intuition starts with unlearning. Unlearning the lie that your feelings are wrong. Unlearning the belief that discomfort means danger. Unlearning the idea that truth must be logical to be real. Intuition doesn't speak in facts. It speaks in resonance, in energy, in an unshakable sense that something is right or wrong for you even if no one else understands it. And that's where the healing begins. When you stop demanding your inner voice to justify itself and start honoring it because it's yours. But make no mistake, trusting your intuition will feel threatening to the parts of you that are still seeking approval. Because when you begin listening to yourself again, you start making different choices. You say no more often. You walk away from what drains you. You stop explaining your boundaries. You trust the pause. You let things fall away without chasing them back. And for a while that may feel like you're betraying what you were taught. But in truth, you're finally honoring what's been buried inside you all along. Your intuition isn't a luxury, it's your compass. And when you dismiss it, you don't just lose direction, you lose trust in yourself. That's why the work of healing isn't just about feeling better, it's about feeling more. It's about allowing your body, your instincts, your inner wisdom to lead. Not perfectly, not without fear, but with integrity. It's about remembering that what you feel deeply often carries more truth than what others say with certainty. So if you've been taught to dismiss your intuition, know this, that conditioning is not permanent. It can be undone. You can learn to listen again. You can learn to trust the subtle sensations in your chest. The gut feeling that won't go away, the inner nudge that says, this is not for me. You can rebuild that sacred relationship with yourself, not because you have all the answers, but because you are finally willing to stop abandoning the voice that's been trying to protect you all along. You can build a life that checks every box: success, stability, relationships, routine, and still feel deeply disconnected inside. That's what happens when you ignore the voice within. It doesn't vanish. It waits, and while you're busy living up to expectations, climbing ladders that don't lead where your soul wants to go, something inside you slowly starts to fade. You become a version of yourself that's acceptable, impressive, maybe even admired, but hollow, not because you're weak or ungrateful, but because you've spent so long building a life from the outside in, instead of the inside out. Ignoring your inner voice doesn't just silence your truth, it replaces it with noise, with distractions, with roles you play so well, you forget they aren't really you. You become the good partner, the reliable worker, the strong one who keeps it all together. But late at night, when the performance ends, and there's nothing left to do but be with yourself, a quiet ache creeps in, the kind you can't name, but can't shake either. That's the cost of ignoring your truth. It doesn't destroy you in a single moment, it erodes you over time, one silent compromise at a time. We're often told that success means security, so we chase titles, routines, boxes to check. But when you mute your instincts to chase that version of success, what you often end up with is a life that looks good on paper, but feels lifeless in your chest. You smile in photos but the joy is missing. You stay busy but the meaning feels thin. And even though everything seems fine on the surface, something always feels off. That's the internal compass you've ignored trying to get your attention. Not to punish you, but to bring you home. Sometimes the scariest part isn't realizing you're lost. It's realizing how far you've gone. Pretending you're not. You've learned to explain away the emptiness. I'm just tired. I should be grateful. This is what adulthood looks like. But deep down, you know, there's a version of you that still remembers what mattered before you started performing. That voice isn't gone. It's buried beneath layers of responsibility, fear and expectations, but it's still whispering, still waiting, still offering a different path, one that might look less polished but would finally feel real. When you ignore your inner voice long enough, it doesn't stop trying, it just speaks through symptoms. Chronic dissatisfaction, anxiety with no clear cause, a sense of flatness in moments that should feel fulfilling. And the mistake most people make is trying to fix those symptoms externally by working harder, changing jobs, ending relationships, without ever asking the deeper question, am I living in alignment with what I actually feel? You can rearrange your life 100 times, but if the foundation was built on someone else's truth, it will never feel like home. But here's the truth most don't want to admit. It's easier to build an impressive life than an authentic one. One earns applause, the other requires courage. One keeps you safe, the other demands you come alive. And that shift from chasing what looks good to honoring what feels true isn't always comfortable. It asks you to break patterns, risk judgment, disappoint others, and walk away from paths you've already invested in. But it's also the only way to move from a life that's empty to a life that's yours. So if your days feel full but your soul feels starved, don't rush to fix it. Get quiet, listen. The voice you've ignored is still there. Subtle, steady, honest. It doesn't speak in urgency or fear. It won't scream for your attention. It will offer you something better. Clarity, direction, alignment. And the moment you begin to honor that voice, not just hear it but follow it, is the moment your life begins to shift. Not instantly, but deeply. Because you were never meant to live a life that just looks good. You were meant to live a life that feels like truth, that feels like home in your own skin, that feels like freedom in your own choices, that doesn't require you to pretend, perform, or abandon yourself. That life is still possible, but only if you stop ignoring the one voice that knows exactly how to lead you there. Following your inner voice sounds simple, just listen and act. But in reality it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, because that voice doesn't shout. It doesn't guarantee comfort, success, or validation. What it offers is something deeper, truth, and the moment you decide to follow it, everything you built to protect your false self starts to shake. You may lose relationships that were built on who you pretended to be. You may walk away from careers that paid the bills but drained your soul. You'll face fear not because you're weak, but because you're stepping into the unknown without the old armor. Most people don't ignore their inner voice because they don't hear it. They ignore it because they do, and it scares them. It threatens everything they've used to feel safe. That voice doesn't always say what you want to hear. It says what you need to hear, like leave, rest, try again, or this isn't who you are. And sometimes it tells you to risk everything familiar for something uncertain. But while it may lead you into discomfort, it never leads you into betrayal, not of yourself. Following your truth doesn't come with applause. It often comes with silence. People won't always understand. You'll have to disappoint expectations, say no when you were trained to say yes, and trust feelings over logic. You might feel like you're losing your place in the world, but what you're actually doing is losing your mask and finding your soul. And that's not a loss, it's a return. Every time you honor that voice, even in small ways, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was never meant to be buried. And here's what no one tells you. The more you follow that voice, the louder and clearer it becomes. You stop needing permission. You stop outsourcing your decisions to others. You begin to live from the inside out. That's when fulfillment starts. Not the kind that looks good in photos, but the kind that makes you